On today's Wrestle Juice, we're going to talk about WCW. It's why I'm sitting here with my WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Of course, this was the successor to the World Heavyweight Championship in WCW. And there's been rumors flying around that WWE might be wanting to bring back WCW as a brand, and they're based off of these trademark filings that WWE made recently for two things. Number one, New Blood Rising. It was an old pay-per-view that they did under the Vince Russo era. And then The Match Beyond, which was an element of how they would dub the War Games match. WCW would back in the day. So it got the internet thinking, whoa, wait a second. Does that mean they're bringing back WCW as a brand? I'll get to my actual thoughts on if this is going to happen later. In short, I don't. But it did get me thinking, they might, they could, and maybe they should. And we're going to talk about 5 reasons why that could happen on this Wrestle Juice. I'm going to go ahead and put this down. Our good friend Alto got this for us years ago, and it was so nice of him, but it's very heavy, and I don't really want to wear it during an episode. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Reasons why WWE could bring back WCW as a wrestling brand. Number one, name value, right? So just recently, of course, Vice aired that docu-series, Who Killed WCW? I think it was pretty popular. A lot of people tuned in to see that. A lot of people remember those days of WCW very fondly, or if they weren't around for them, they've heard about them because of all these different documentaries that have come out ever since WWF bought WCW. The name value is still incredibly strong with WCW. Not just the WCW name, but also the intellectual property that sort of was under WCW, namely the NWO or the NWO Wolfpack. Right now, the LWO is an actual faction on SmackDown. It always surprised me that WWE had sort of had a lot of pretty relatively popular wrestling intellectual properties throughout the years that they've never really capitalized on. If you look at the merch shop, number one, WCW, type WCW in the search, there's a lot of stuff that they're selling with WCW brand on it. NWO shirts still to this day, 30 years later, are huge sellers. If they want to bring back like a WCW Nitro, let's say as part of their Netflix deal, film it the way they used to with the old WWE CW, where they sort of tape stuff, you know, as the dark matches or after episodes of Raw or SmackDown or whatever, or at the house shows or however they do it. You could bring back an NWO led by like a Kevin Nash or something and have the old legends that are still around participate in the shows. We'll get to that in a second. But the name value for WCW and what was going on in WCW, I think is still pretty strong. And you'd think that maybe they would want to capitalize on that. All right, so let's talk about number 2. And I'm talking about there are still plenty of legends out there that could participate. Kevin Nash, Goldberg, Eric Bischoff, Scott Steiner. They have Booker T under contract. DDP is always hanging out with Cody Rhodes. Medusa's still out there. They could use her as sort of the bridge between what they would do, which is take a bunch of wrestlers that they already have signed and use them as the wrestlers in WCW and bridge them with the legends of the old days of WCW. There's obviously a couple that couldn't do it, namely Ric Flair and Sting, because Ric Flair, I think, still has like an active 3-year agreement with AEW, and Sting just finished up his run in wrestling. I would find it really difficult to believe, given how he was treated last time he was there, that he would show up for this, but I guess stranger things have happened. I don't see it happening, but there are still enough names that are really strongly associated with WCW that they could bring them in just to do something, just to be there, just to be managers, just to be, you know, general managers or presidents or what have you. There's a lot of legends out there that they could totally use that would still be available. All right, let's dive into number 3, and this might be one of the more important ones. That's simply to relieve the pressure of all the people they have signed as wrestlers in WCW, and maybe more people that they want to sign. Right now, WWE has 6 hours of of cable television programming. Of course, on January 1st, Raw heads to Netflix. SmackDown is going to go to USA Network, and NXT is going to go to the CW. But they keep on signing people. And at some point, they're just not going to have enough programming to use everybody. At some point, a lot of people in NXT are going to get called up. And then what happens? You can't faction up everybody. I mean, you could faction up everybody, but at a certain point, people are going to want to get used. I think of guys like Baron Corbin and Apollo Crews, who basically get a segment here and there, a match here and there over on SmackDown, but they're not really doing a whole heck of a lot with them. Other wrestlers, if they're not using on main roster, even if they're veterans, they'll kick them down to NXT, and they're not really doing a whole lot there. I think of a guy like LA Knight, who's in a program right now with Logan Paul for the United States Championship, and I see a guy who's basically, I'm not going to call him a relic, but he's basically a throwback wrestler to the 90s. He would be a perfect WCW world champion. I could totally see that happening. There's a number of wrestlers who I think would just sort of fit into the WCW thing. I mean, you could dress it up like the old Nitro with the giant steel corrugated logo, and it would solve one of your problems of what do we do with all these wrestlers? You don't want to risk them going over to AEW because they might do something with them more interesting than what WWE was doing with them. I mean, WWE kind of does that now with some of AEW's wrestlers, but you get my point. At some point, they're going to need a place for all these wrestlers that they're signing, for all the wrestlers in developmental, for all the wrestlers that are going to be getting called up from NXT, and there's only so much time on TV to use them. Let's go into my fourth reason, which is basically there's seemingly no shortage of potential suitors for additional WWE content. We just saw that WrestleMania XL Behind the Curtain documentary debut on YouTube instead of Peacock. Twitter has its own WWE show now. It wouldn't shock me if maybe to sweeten this Netflix deal, WWE was like, hey, you know what? We'll give you an extra hour a week or an extra 2 hours a week for Netflix, and we'll call it WCW, and that'll get a bunch of people to tune in to check it out. That's a possibility. They also have YouTube. They could put it on YouTube as a YouTube exclusive show. They could find somebody else who's interested in wrestling content to pony up millions of dollars for something that really wouldn't be too expensive to produce. You could either take NXT out on the road and put WCW in the Performance Center. You could just put WCW in the Performance Center, but on a different night from NXT, like maybe Wednesday. There's any number of things they can do. And in this day and age, when content is like everything, WWE could be offering somebody that premium WCW content for whatever their platform is. There seems to be suitors for the stuff. And so WWE might be wise to take them up on that. And if you guys remember years ago, there was this other thing called NXT UK. It was an additional hour of content, and it ended up being kind of like an NXT for NXT. A lot of those people would go from the European scene over to NXT proper, and maybe they would use that for WCW. There's also a rumor ages ago that when they bought Evolve, I think they bought Evolve. They were going to use that as a televised program. They'd even shot a pilot of that, and they were going to use that as sort of the NXT for NXT. But then for whatever reason, Vince went ahead and killed that. So it seems like in the past, they have thought about and actively pursued yet more wrestling, another brand. It's possible they want to flood the market with WWE product right now, largely because WWE is hot. So why not flood the market with it, especially for this last reason? And it's not one that I agree with, but I could see WWE wanting to do this. It's just more competition for AEW. Imagine this. They want to put they want to put WCW on Netflix. They run it on Wednesday nights. Maybe they even do it live on Wednesday nights. They call it WCW Wednesday Nitro. Netflix doesn't release their viewership numbers. So it wouldn't be a ratings war, or WWE, hell, knowing them, they could just make up numbers. So one week, AEW does 680,000. That's the same week that they could release the thing that says, hey, guess what? Looks like we did around, 780,000. We did 800,000 with WCW. Look, we beat them again. But it's just WWE making fake numbers. I don't think they would do that, but it wouldn't be a ratings war, so they wouldn't have to worry about, AEW beat WCW again. It's just, hey, we're on Netflix. We're here on Wednesdays. we're alive, and now that's another thing AEW has to contend with. I kind of feel like WWE wouldn't mind adding some actual head-to-head competition against AEW, and it wouldn't be that expensive or difficult to produce. It's not like they'd have to sign up a bunch of extra people. I imagine a lot of those legends I talked about earlier are probably under legends contracts anyways, so they could just bring them in and they'd have something to do, which wrestlers like to have stuff to do. Anyways, so yeah, there you go. There's 5 reasons why I think WWE could totally bring back WCW as its own brand. Do I think it's going to happen? We've been given no indication that that's the case. I honestly doubt that would happen. It's just one of those things where maybe they want to do an NXT pay-per-view called New Blood Rising. In fact, I'm almost positive that's what it is, because they've got a bunch of other old WCW names that they use for NXT these days, and this is probably just the latest one. You got to crop a new talent like Javon Evans over there. I could see them doing maybe, just maybe, the veterans versus, the new wrestlers type thing with New Blood Rising. That's probably what it's going to be. I doubt this is going to happen, but it's wrestling. It's fun to talk about, and this is Wrestle Juice, and this is where we like to have fun talking about shit. And my dog is totally growling off camera right now. I'm going to show her. Here. Look at her. There's her belly. There's her big belly. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, what? Oh, there's a little tail wag right there. Okay. Anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you guys around. Let me know what you guys think about WCW in the comments below. What was your favorite episode of Nitro? What was your favorite episode of Thunder or Saturday Night? Let me know.